Hi, my name is Penny Nestor, and I am the Agricultural and Natural Resource Agent in Kidder County out of Steele, North Dakota. Today we're going to talk about backyard chickens. This is something that I've had a lot of experience in since on my off time I also judge poultry and rabbits in the state of North Dakota and previously in the state of South Dakota. And I grew up raising chickens and rabbits in Southwest North Dakota, showing in 4-H and FFA. So today we're going to talk about backyard chickens as far as raising a small flock in your backyard in an urban area. There's been a lot of recent movement for owners to get involved in raising backyard poultry because it can offer families the opportunity to raise their own meat and eggs, as well as getting involved in 4-H and helping people learn the basics of starting and raising livestock. So today we're going to focus on selecting the right poultry for your needs, learning requirements and skills, and some techniques to help raise poultry and make it a success. So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? In this presentation, we're not going to talk about either of these coming first. To be a responsible animal owner, you first must do your research and come up with a plan to raise poultry. So today we're going to talk about some of the considerations that need to go into that plan. One of the first things that you need to consider is where you live and if there is ordinances or restrictions on having poultry or other livestock in the city that you live in. So this is the first thing that you do before you do anything else is check your city ordinances, or if you're in a housing association, check those ordinances to make sure that there are no restrictions on poultry or livestock, including poultry. You will be surprised in the state of North Dakota, a lot of small towns do have ordinances against raising poultry within city limits. So make sure you check before you get an animal. In a lot of places, you may need a permit before you can get poultry. So this permit application is different in each town that you go to, but basically a lot of the permits go through location descriptions, what your responsibilities will be. They might ask you for a site plan of how you want to set up your poultry coop and run, what materials you're making that out of, the space requirements for that, how many birds that you're planning on purchase, and there also may be a fee for application. So some of these applications can be a process for every few years. Some of them might be an annual application that you need to complete. So make sure you are aware of that before you start getting animals in your backyard. So for the places that do not have or do have restrictions, these ordinances may be updated and changed to allow chickens, but keep in mind that this takes time and patience. When you're doing this, you need to work with your city officials and be civil in the process. Make sure that you show justification of why these rules should be changed and maybe some examples from other cities that have made these changes. Raising poultry in a controlled, clean, and healthy and safe environment is key. So we want to prove to the city officials that you are responsible and do understand the welfare of the animals that you are raising. So after you've checked out the ordinances for raising poultry, the next thing that you have to think about is purchasing chickens and where you are going to purchase those chickens from. So a lot of people like the idea of purchasing chicks right away and raising those chicks. That's probably the most common way of raising poultry. But one thing to think about when you are purchasing chicks or chickens is make sure you're aware of state and federal regulations that are required for having poultry. So one thing that we highly recommend is that if you are buying chickens, make sure that you purchase them from a National Poultry Improvement Plan certified independent flock, hatchery, or breeder, so NPIP. Most of your major hatcheries are NPIP certified and will have the necessary paperwork. This is especially important if you are going to show any of those animals, because there are requirements in showing poultry and having them tested before they're shown. For out-of-state birds, especially older birds, make sure that you check with the North Dakota Department of Agriculture to ensure that they don't need any additional health certificates or additional testing. For chicks, another thing to keep in mind that is optional in most hatcheries is the option to vaccinate for coccidiosis and Merrick's disease. Definitely something that I highly recommend, since both of these diseases are very easily spread and very common in the state. So you want to have healthy chicks, and the first way to do that is to make sure that they are vaccinated. The next thing that you need to consider is what type of breed of chicken you want to get for the state of North Dakota. Let's face it, we don't have the ideal living conditions in the state of North Dakota all year round. So we need an animal that can handle cold temperatures, and not all breeds of chickens are really cut out for our state. So there are hundreds of different breeds of chickens out there that you can pick from. These are some of the most common ones that we have in North Dakota that I've split out by different purpose for that breed. There are more breeds out there. Another thing to keep in mind is make sure that you know what you're going to raise those chickens for. If they're going to be meat producers, egg producers, just a hobby or a pet bird, or if they're going to be used for a bit of both. Another thing to consider is, do you have kids? Are these chickens going to be a 4-H project? A lot of times when we get animals for 4-H projects, we try to pick something that's a little fancier. One thing that I really encourage is that you make a selection based off of a recognized breed through the American Poultry Association. So each breed has a standard, and that's how they're judged in 4-H, is through that standard. So make sure that you're picking out something that is breed recognized, not just a hatchery hybrid that the hatchery has developed, because that makes that chicken a lot harder to be judged in 4-H if it doesn't have necessarily a standard behind it to back it up. So with meat breeds of chickens, Cornish are probably the more popular, or the most popular, and Cornish hybrids. Each hatchery will have a hybrid meat breed of its choice, or that it'll recommend. Most of them are Cornish or Cornish crosses. There's also Delaware broilers, ginger broilers, and maybe Rangers that the hatchery will also recommend. They may also have the option to get a mixed batch of broilers, which technically usually is the chickens that they don't want from the dual purpose breeds. So it's probably the male chickens from their sex-linked varieties, or a variety of different breeds of chicks that they weren't able to get sold in another avenue, so they will go into a mixed meat broiler pen, and those will be sold as a discount. They probably will be a little slower growing than what your Cornish broiler or some of your other broilers will be that are specifically meat breeds. Your dual purpose breeds, we have a lot of them listed here, but those are the breeds that can be used for both meat and eggs. These are usually a little bit of a larger breed of chicken, and the ones that I have listed here are probably the ones that are most commonly seen in the state of North Dakota. Your egg breeds are breeds that are primarily purchased and raised for egg production. So Leghorns are probably the most common because they're one of the breeds of chickens that have a nice uniform white egg. Americanas are also very popular in our state, or hybrids of Americanas, which usually are called rainbowers or Easter eggers. Those ones have different colors of eggs, and then you have Spanish and stars as well. Typically your dual purpose breeds, a lot of them will have brown eggs. Your leghorns will have white eggs. Some other breeds that I want to mention are bantams. Bantams, all breeds come in a bantam variety. That just means that they're a bantam breed that is bred a lot smaller than what your standard size breed is. They make great birds, great pets as well. But just remember that they're going to be a lot smaller bird. They're going to have a lot smaller egg and a lot smaller body type. So they're going to be 6 to 8 inches tall. Their eggs are going to be the size of a ping pong ball. And they're really fun. It's just that they're not going to be as production minded as some of your standard breeds. Polish and Silkies are also what I would consider a pet or hobby breed, just because they're a little harder to raise in North Dakota. They definitely need more care and warmer housing in the winter. Another breed of chicken that we're going to talk about is the Turken or the naked neck, which is the same type. A lot of people think that these are a cross between a turkey and a chicken. They're really not. They're just a breed of chicken that has been bred to have a naked neck. So they're more of a dual purpose breed as well, but you're not going to see them very often because they're actually a little bit more expensive to purchase in the hatchery if the hatchery offers them. Another thing to consider when you're looking at breeds of chickens in North Dakota is what kind of comb that they have. So a lot of our chickens will have a single comb, which is fine for North Dakota, but if you are raising chickens to exhibit them when they're older, keep in mind that our cold winters, the first thing that gets frostbite on a chicken is their comb, and that is one of the first things that a chicken is judged on in a competitive show. So maybe like raising a leghorn that is known for really long, droopy comb is probably not the best thing to have in North Dakota. Maybe picking a breed that has a rose comb or a pea comb or something a little bit smaller and easier to manage would be a better plan for a North Dakota bird. Single combs are fine, and a lot of breeds have smaller single combs, but just remember on your cockerels and your roosters, after that first winter, those combs can really be affected. So talking about combs and getting frostbite in the winter, the next thing that we're going to talk about is housing, because that is the key player of whether you are successful raising chickens in North Dakota. I think a lot of people think of housing and they think of this cute little chicken house with windows and doors that is perfectly manicured and maybe has some flowers out front, like this picture that I'm showing right here. Has this cute little nesting box that you can just pick your eggs out of each day. Unfortunately, this is really probably not a suitable chicken house that will sustain our weather in North Dakota in the winters. The other thing to keep in mind is that poultry are relatively messy. So what looks pristine when it's newly built is probably not going to stay pristine. That's just kind of the nature of how poultry are. So make sure that you are getting suitable housing for these birds. In winter, keep in mind that the chicken coop should be south facing. That provides enough light to come into the windows to give you as much time for those chickens to lay more eggs when your days become shorter. Make sure that you have an enclosure for your chickens to protect them against predators. Chickens do not like drafts, or any poultry don't like drafts, so make sure that you have a housing facility that is draft free. It doesn't necessarily have to be insulated, but it needs to be well constructed so it can hold and heat and help those birds generate heat from their bodies. Ventilation is also important in both winter and summer. Chickens they give off a lot of ammonia, which we're going to talk about later, in their feces, so ventilation is key. In the summer, looking at housing situations, you need something with some airflow, something that you can open up so they can get airflow. Chickens are susceptible to heat stroke, very susceptible, especially if you have broilers. Summer conditions are not ideal for broilers. Chickens need access to shade at all times, and remember that you need to have a coop that is easily accessible so you can clean it. So a lot of these new designer coops that you see, the first thing that I see when I look at them is that they are not necessarily easy to clean, and you are going to have something that's easy to clean, easy to sanitize. The other thing with housing is make sure you're giving your chickens enough space. So the rule of thumb for standard bred pullet is that pullet needs about 1.5 to 2.5 square feet of confined floor space per bird. So a larger breed will need more space than a smaller breed or a bantam. Make sure that you're providing that, because that can have some issues down the road with your chickens if you're not giving them enough space. Perches are also essential for chickens. Chickens do like to perch at night, and it actually keeps them safer when they have the ability to perch, and also keeps them warmer if they're not forced to stand on a cold concrete floor. The other thing to keep in mind is you need to provide nesting boxes for your birds. Keep in mind that nesting boxes are for chickens to lay eggs in. They are not where that chicken needs to camp out. So training those chickens to lay their eggs and then get out of the nesting box is key. You don't want those chickens spending the night in the nesting box unless they are setting on eggs. The other thing to keep in mind, you see with this picture that I'm showing you, is the nesting box is on the outside with an easy access lid. That's probably not ideal for winter, because that will be the coldest part of the house and will be an easy place for drafts to come in. So here are some examples of different chicken houses that I have found online. Having a chicken house that just has a nice backyard shed that you can reinforce and update to be a chicken house is also always a good plan. Remember that they don't make things like they used to, so a backyard shed probably will need to be insulated and updated to stand our North Dakota winters. But it's also always a good place to start. Also, having a run is essential, especially if you're going to have a poultry in town. So having a run that protects the chicken and also makes sure that those chickens don't get out is going to be key. Another example of a good chicken coop or brooder house is what they call a colony brooder house design. So this is what most of the designs of our brooder houses or our older chicken coops that we'll see on farms are. Here's this red and white one in the middle of the slide. It kind of shows you a design from University of Minnesota Extension. These were really well made. If you have one on your place, I really encourage you to fix it up and continue to use it, because they are well designed. They're usually facing the south. They usually are well constructed with thick materials and tongue and groove wood that doesn't allow very much drafting in it. So definitely another good option. Over to our right, we have some of our summer options that people have used for backyard poultry and to move poultry around if they want more of a grazing situation with poultry. So a summer hoop house is another example. This one's from the University of Kentucky that you can move around. The chickens have shade, they are secure. Another thing I see a lot of is people converting pickup toppers and make those into summer homes as well, that they can move where they need to throughout the summer. So chickens have the ability to get fresh grass and insects. So the other huge thing that you need to be aware of when raising any type of poultry is trying to prevent predators from getting your chickens. So if you have any type of backyard flock, you probably have had some type of predator come in and wipe out your chickens at least once while raising poultry. That's just kind of the way it is. But you know, even though we do have a lot of predators that prey on poultry in North Dakota, there are some things that we can help do to prevent them from getting in. So make sure that we build as predator-proof housing as we can. So make sure when you are building chicken runs that they have fences around them, they have overhead netting, and also they have something underground to prevent digging underneath the fence to get to the birds. Get in the habit of closing all doors to the coop each night at dusk and open them again in the morning. This not only trains the birds to go back into the coop, into their home at night, but it also prevents predators from sneaking in, since a lot of these predators are nocturnal, and that's usually when you are going to have most of your problems. Another thing is keeping your feed in a sealed container, probably away from your chickens. Those predators like snakes and rats will be attracted to that chicken feed on top of the chickens. So keep that feed away from them and harder to get in. Even raccoons will be tempted to go after the feed first, and if they can't get the feed, they will go after the actual chicken. Some of the most common types of predators are actually your neighbors' dogs and cats, or your own dogs or cats. Typically in backyard chicken operations, dogs and cats are going to be the first prey that are going to go after your chickens. Fox and coyotes are very common. Overhead, eagles, hawks and owls. Raccoons, skunks, and weasels are also some things to be concerned about. Snakes and rats are another common issue, especially in smaller baby birds. So just be aware of these and try to keep them out as best as you can, but understand that predators will happen when raising chickens. It's just a part of raising poultry that you need to be prepared for. So with newly hatched chicks, you know, there's a lot of different ways to raise chicks. A lot of people getting into chickens will usually purchase newly hatched chicks. We really encourage you to get those vaccinated and set up a brooder place that will fit your newly hatched chicks. One of the best ways to do that I like doing is just taking a water tank and make that into your brooder. It has rounded corners, it's easy to heat, it's easy to cover, and it's relatively easy to keep clean. So definitely a great option for keeping a brooder. So keep in mind that newly hatched chicks do need a reliable heat source. The first week they need that heat to be about 95 degrees, and then you need to reduce the temperature by 5 degrees each week as they get older. So you'll need to heat that brooder house for the first 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the season, to make sure those chicks have adequate feathering when you stop heating that source. Space for chicks, you need about a half a square foot per bird for the first 6 weeks. And then make sure that you're adapting those animals to feed and water immediately when you get them. So usually they'll come into the mail. You want to immediately get them into your brooder. Make sure your brooder is warm and ready to go when you start unloading your chicks from the box. As you take them out of the box, make sure you dip each of the chicks' beaks into the water dish so they get acclimated to moisture and water. And then help them find where the food is by using bright colored shallow feeders for both your feed and your water. Make sure you clean those out and change to give fresh feed and water daily, and that will keep your chicks healthier. Nutrition is also a common question that we get in extension when people are raising poultry. keep in mind that a good balanced diet is essential for successfully raising chickens. And typically when we have problems with chickens or any other type of livestock, it's going to come back down to nutrition. So make sure you have a complete feed that you're feeding your chickens. So a complete feed is usually a processed, granulated, or pelleted feed that has all of the protein, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals that those chickens are going to need in order to grow. Keep in mind that chickens grow very fast, especially depending on what type of chickens you're raising. So they will need different feed going through their stages of life. So when you first get chicks, they need to be on a starter feed for the first 6 to 8 weeks. This can be medicated or non-medicated feed. Medicated just means that that feed is medicated for coccidiosis to try to prevent that. It's a very common disease in chicks. So if you're just having chicks, I recommend getting them vaccinated for coccidiosis and using the medicated feed. If you have other poultry in there, then you will need to use non-medicated feed, because medicated feed is only approved for using chicken or use of in chickens, not for ducks, geese, or turkeys. So use the starter for both broilers and egg layers. As they get older, in that 6 to 8 week age, then you can change them over to a different type of feed. So if you are raising broilers that you want to butcher in the first 8 to 12 weeks, you need to turn over to finisher. So that is a feed really high in protein that those animals can gain weight quickly on. If you are developing egg layers, then you want to use developer. A developer will have a little bit different nutrient balance in it and a little bit different mineral package. It will provide those animals a little slower development so they can be good egg layers when they get to that 20 weeks of age. As they start laying eggs, then you will need to switch them over to layer ration. So that's 20 weeks plus. Keep in mind that a lot of people use scratch feed, and that's what these chickens are eating in the picture is a mix of scratch feed or a mix of grain, something like that. Keep in mind that scratch feed is not a complete diet for your chickens. So I know a lot of people like to cut corners by feeding oats or scratch feed or grain. You can probably get by with doing that for a mature bird, but a younger bird under a year old, you're going to run into some major issues if you're not giving them a complete diet. Also remember that all animals need fresh water at all times, and chickens are special. They do have gizzards, so they need some sort of grit to keep that gizzard functional, or oyster shells. Oyster shells are great if you do have egg layers, because they do provide an additional source of calcium for your egg layers as well. If you're not feeding your chickens a balanced diet or ration, you can see some symptoms of nutrition deficiencies, and chickens are very sensitive to this. So they're very prone to nutrient deficiencies, especially in the first year of life. Common deficiencies are associated with protein and amino acid lack, vitamin deficiencies, and also mineral deficiencies. So here are some symptoms that you might see. Lack of energy, crooked toes or crooked wings. You might see feather abnormalities, muscle spasms or weakening, dermatitis or skin lesions, keratinization of mucous membranes. Another symptom is pecking or cannibalism and egg eating. Keep in mind that cannibalism can also be attributed to not having enough space for your poultry. And these two issues are really hard to break. Once chickens start to cannibalize each other or eat eggs, it's very hard to get them to stop. So make sure that you're preventing this problem by feeding your chickens correctly before it becomes an issue. Manure management is also a really important factor with raising poultry. So chickens are a little unique because their manure, they just have one semi-liquid type of manure. Their urine and their feces mixed together in one product that is extremely wet. So you know, they are, like I said before, chickens are relatively dirty animals. They can make a mess if you're not taking care of them. So make sure that you're keeping their living area clean and dry. This can prevent a lot of disease spread. It can keep your animals and your eggs cleaner, and also reduce ammonia buildup. So ammonia buildup is huge for raising chickens. So it's not only dangerous to the chicken, but it's also dangerous to you if you are cleaning that chicken coop that has a lot of ammonia buildup. That's why you make sure that you are in a well ventilated area when you are cleaning it. Don't overdo it, and make sure that you have a fan running. You know, if there is a huge buildup of manure, make sure that you're cleaning that out in the spring or the summer months or the fall months, so you can get access to that airflow and blow things out and keep things open when you're cleaning those buildings, and not get yourself into a dangerous situation that you can burn your lungs on. Chicken manure is actually a great fertilizer if you use it in moderation. Like anything else, a little bit is good, but a lot is not so good. You can get some, use a little bit too much and, you know, burn your soil if you use too much. Also, if you aren't going to use your litter or your manure as fertilizer, make sure you check with your landfill if you're disposing of manure or deceased animals to see what their requirements and regulations are. So while you're raising chickens, also some safety tips. Chickens are a great livestock to raise, but with anything else, they can carry germs and cause illness if you're not careful. So Salmonella, Campylobacter, and E. coli are three most common foodborne illnesses that chickens and chicken or poultry products do carry. So when you're working with chickens, just make sure that you're washing your hands well after being in the area with chickens or handling chickens. Make sure that you're using different boots when you're outside versus inside your home. You know, have shoes reserved for just working with your chickens, and shoes that you wear everywhere else. Make sure you're supervising your kids and make sure that they're washing their hands adequately after they're around poultry. If you do get any scratches or wounds caused by the chickens or the equipment that you're using, which does happen because there's a lot of wire and nails and things, make sure you're watching for infection of those wounds and clean those wounds and treat them properly and immediately. And another thing to keep in mind is make sure you're current on your tetanus vaccinations when you're working around equipment like this. So some resources that you might want to consider looking into before you decide to start raising poultry is our NDSU poultry building plans. We have a huge list of different designs and building plans for egg laying boxes, perches, different coop designs, things like that. For small scale poultry raising, University of Minnesota also has some great resources available to help you get started. The American Poultry Association, that goes through different breeds that are recognized through their association. And then the National Poultry Improvement Plan. So that goes through some of the diseases that poultry may get, and also a list of breeders and sellers that are NPIP certified. So thank you for listening to our backyard poultry discussion, and please let me know if you have any additional questions. Have a great day.